Imu is going to win at Elbaf, and I know that this sounds insane, but we've watched Luffy topple warlords, dethrone emperors, and awaken a devil fruit which turns reality into a cartoon. So the idea that he's about to properly lose, like on the level of Sabaody, feels wrong. But Oda spent 25 years teaching us the same lesson over and over again, and we keep forgetting it. Luffy's greatest victories always come following some of his worst defeats. Luffy returning after the time skip, Gear 5 igniting on the roof of Onigashima, the crew reuniting at Sabaody with 2 years of growth behind them. None of these moments exist without a catastrophe that came first. Oda only gives these victories to Luffy after he breaks him, and then he rebuilds him as a stronger version. Elbaf has every marker of the next breaking point. The Straw Hats didn't come here to fight a god, as they were here to explore a Viking island, reconnect with the giants, and dig into ancient lore. Imu crashing into the Elbaf arc halfway through as an uninvited guest with no build-up or warning. This is how Oda sets up a climactic victory. But this victory will only come after a major disaster. In this video, I'll prove to you what's actually happening on the battlefield of Elbaf right now. We'll be analysing every narrative tool that Oda has established within One Piece, as I'm going to try to prove why Imu has to win here. But you know who always wins every battle that they are in? These are the individuals that are subscribed to the channel. Only 10% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed, so if you enjoy these One Piece theories and breakdowns, then hit the bell notification and the subscribe button for even more One Piece videos just like this. The central argument I'm making is that some of the biggest moments within One Piece that have burned themselves into our memories are all born from devastation. Think about Sabaody Archipelago, which is the clearest example. The Straw Hats rolled into that island riding the highest wave of momentum that they had ever experienced. They had just conquered Thriller Bark. They were days away from the new world, but then within the span of a few chapters, everything collapsed. A single pacifista nearly killed the entire crew. They burned through every ounce of energy just to take down one of those things, and then a second one appeared alongside Sentomaru. Kizaru showed up and started dismantling supernovas like he was swatting away flies. He took out individuals like Uruge, Hawkins, Drake, and Apu one after the other. Zoro was still carrying the accumulated damage from taking all of Luffy's pain on Thriller Bark as he could barely stand. Rayleigh had to step in personally to block Kizaru from killing him, and then Kuma arrived. What followed is still one of the most painful sequences that Oda's ever drawn. Zoro vanished and then broke. Usopp was reaching for his weapon and disappeared before he could do anything. Sanji charged in with fury and got erased mid-stride. Next was Frankie, and then Nami screaming for Luffy as she faded away. Robin was then wiped off of the battlefield, and lastly Chopper, who was in his Monster Point form. Luffy then collapsed to the ground, totally alone, with him berating himself for not being able to even save a single one of his friends. Kuma appears in front of him and tells him that they would never meet again, as he sent him flying. The narrator confirms this, that on that day in Grove 12 of Sabaody Archipelago, the Straw Hat Pirates were completely and utterly defeated. Fans were furious, confused, and heartbroken, but it was also the most important turning point within the narrative back then. Because without Sabaody, there is no time skip, and without the time skip, there's no Haki mastery. Without Haki, there is no Luffy fighting admirals or conquering the new world, and incidentally, he would not have attained Emperor status. Every major accomplishment that the Straw Hats achieved after those 2 years of training exists because Oda destroyed the Straw Hats completely, and we later learned Kuma whispered to Rayleigh that he was actually saving them by scattering the crew to specific islands where they could grow. The loss that felt like a annihilation was a catalyst for everything that followed. Oda did it again at Marineford. The entire Summit War is structured around a single question: can Luffy save Ace? Everything that the story arc does, every alliance that's been forged, a wall that was climbed, all of the impossible gambles serve this single objective. Luffy breaks into Impel Down. He gathers an army of escapees as he lands on the battlefield and fights through the entire Marine Force. Garp, his own grandfather, plants himself on the execution platform and he tells Luffy he'll have to kill him to pass. Luffy throws a Gear 2 punch and Garp closes his eyes as he lets it hit him, because even the hero of the Marines can't bring himself to stop his grandson from saving his brother. And Luffy actually gets to the platform as Mr. 3 forges a wax key. Ace ends up being freed as we see the brothers standing side by side for the first time, fighting as equals. We then get a beautiful stretch of memorable panels as it looks like Luffy pulled off the impossible, but then Akainu opens his mouth as he calls Whitebeard a failure from a bygone era, and Ace, who has spent his entire life trying to prove that he deserved to exist, that the son of Goldie Roger had earned his place in the world, he stops running because Whitebeard was the father that Ace had chosen, the man whose name he carried on his back, and Ace wasn't going to let anyone call that man a failure. The Whitebeard pirates scream at Ace to keep moving, but he doesn't listen. Akainu targets Luffy as Ace throws himself in the way as a fist of magma punches clean through Ace's chest. Heartbreakingly, Ace dies in Luffy's arms as his viewer card burns to nothing, and Luffy, the boy who punched a celestial dragon for hurting his friend, who had stormed Enies lobby for Robin, who fought his way through Impel Down on willpower and hormones, this moment shatters him as he goes catatonic. Ivankov calls out to him and gets nothing back as Jinbei has to physically carry him away from the battlefield because Luffy has stopped functioning here as a human. Marineford is the emotional foundation of everything that follows. Luffy's decision to train for 2 years, his obsessive need to protect his crew at all costs, the weight behind every fight in the New World, it all traces back to the moment that Luffy lost Ace. Without this loss, the payoff of the post-time skip doesn't exist. Whole Cake Island is a subtler version of this same structure. Oda doesn't frame the arc as defeat Big Mom. The goal from the offset is to get Sanji back, and because the goal is rescue rather than victory, the Straw Hats never actually beat the Big Mom pirates. They escape but barely as Pedro dies. Luffy's fight with Katakuri was brutal and he barely survived it. The crew was chased out of Totto Land by a furious Big Mom on a wedding cake fueled rampage. There is no party at the end as the crew sails away wounded and in low spirits, and Oda deliberately made the mood heading home feel sad rather than triumphant. Big Mom's kingdom wasn't a nation crying out for liberation, as their subjects lived there by choice, which meant Oda never needed to give the Straw Hats a clean victory, which means that it was always meant to be messy from the offset. And then most recently we have the Egghead Island arc, which is honestly the reason that I'm confident that Imu is going to win at Elbaf, because Egghead showed us what happens when Oda pulls his punches. The Gorosei showed up, transformed into these nightmarish yokai forms, and the audience was supposed to be terrified, but the Straw Hats never felt like they were in real danger here. Every time the tension spiked, something diffused it. Joy Boy's Haki activated the Iron Giant and brought time for the escape. Luffy was left thinking that he had failed, but readers didn't share in this feeling because Oda had kept the tone too buoyant throughout. The Gorosei walked away from Egghead as established powerhouses on paper, but they didn't leave a scar. Imu's arrival on Elbaf already feels like a different manga entirely than what happened on Egghead. The oppressive atmosphere, as well as the speed at which the strongest fighters on the island are getting dismantled, Oda is doing a complete narrative U-turn compared to what he had done at Egghead. He knows that the final saga's primary antagonist needs to terrify readers, and Egghead taught him that a near miss isn't enough to do that. Even if we were to take ourselves all the way back to Logtown, it follows this same logic but on a smaller scale. Smoker catches Luffy on the execution platform. As Luffy can't beat him, he's completely helpless against a Logia user. Dragon then shows up out of nowhere and creates an opening for Luffy to escape, but Luffy doesn't want someone else to save him. Oda uses this moment to establish that Luffy wasn't ready for what came next, while at the same time planting the seed of Dragon as a character who would matter enormously down the line. Oda even utilizes this narrative principle into shorter comedic arcs like Long Ring Long Land. The Davy Back fight against Foxy sees Luffy actually lose rounds before winning. He loses crew members temporarily, even in a gag story arc. Oda makes the audience feel the sting of defeat before the victory lands. So we've established that Oda wants to deliver big payoffs, but he usually does this after he puts Luffy and the crew through the worst experiences possible. Look at what's happening on Elbaf and tell me that this isn't the setup for the next great loss. Imu didn't send the Gorosei or possess someone from Merijo, like when he projected his consciousness across the ocean like he did with Saturn at God Valley or Gonko at the beginning of the Elbaf invasion. Imu has now physically teleported himself to Elbaf using an abyss portal. After arriving at Orist Castle, he immediately collapses and starts coughing up blood as his body starts transforming on the spot. Moments later, he flies up to the castle's spire and is perched there looking down on the entire island, as he's literally watching all of his enemies like a bird of prey. Leaving Merijo and physically manifesting at Elbaf has a cost. Imu has always ruled from the shadows for 800 years, and he's always operated through servants and covenants, but now the situation at Elbaf is so unprecedented and threatening that he needs to come there himself. When the 5 elders heard his plan, they were horrified. Walkyrie offered to be deployed in his place, as the admirals were even suggested, but Imu rejected all other options. He told the elders that the entire crisis they are facing traces back to his failure to stop Rocks when he confronted him 56 years ago. So for Imu, this is about correcting a mistake that he's been thinking about for over half a century. The moment truly lands, as when Imu arrives, Zoro tries to attack him, but Imu blocks it and blows him away like nothing. Hajruddin attacks him and it's the same result. Sanji, with his exceptional speed and strong observation haki, goes in for a kick, but Imu brushes him aside without effort. Scopper Gaban, the man who sailed with Roger and Rayleigh to Laugh-Tale, looks at Imu's haki and says that it surpassed anything that he's ever felt in his entire life. Yes, this even includes what he had witnessed at God Valley, where Garb, Roger, Whitebeard, Big Mom and Kaido were all fighting simultaneously. Imu then cuts off Gerd's finger before she even registers the attack, as he severed Stanzen's leg with a single slash which was meant for someone else. And he turns Dorry and Brogy, 2 legendary captains of the Great Warrior Pirates, into mindless demons thanks to his Domi Reversi ability. He does the same to their crewmates and other giants across the island, as now the strongest giant fighters on Elbaf are working for the enemy. If you recall God Valley, when Imu fought Rocks 38 years ago, he used the exact same technique as he pierces Rocks with tendrils and invokes Domi Reversi. Rocks manages to resist the transformation temporarily as he used his final moments of consciousness to taunt Imu about who he feared more, Joy Boy or Davy Jones. But Imu turns the argument around by mentioning his plans to subjugate Elbaf, which drew Rocks' anger and completes the Domi Reversi transformation. Then Imu ordered the demonized Rocks to slaughter his own family, which is his wife Eris and his infant son Teach. Kuma manages to push them to safety before Rocks could reach them, but the point still stands. Imu took the most dangerous pirate alive and turned him into a weapon against his own blood. Then there's Luffy and Loki, who arrived on the battlefield together after they had tracked the source of the overwhelming haki. It was Imu-possessed Gonko. Imu looks at them directly and addresses them as Nika and Nidhogg. He gave them 2 options, submit to his will or die, because the resulting battle would likely divide the world. Neither agreed, as Loki fired Lightning Breath and Luffy hit Imu with Dawn Gatling. Loki then struck with Niflheim and froze Imu-possessed Gonko in a block of ice. Imu, back in Merijo minutes later, found the Holy Land in flames and decides the fire at his own capital could wait, because he was going straight back to Elbaf, but this time in person. With Imu wielding the Akuma no Mi in its transformed state, he explains the 3 pillars of his power to Loki while they fight: corruption, covenant, and omen, which together form what he calls domination. He absorbed Omen into his body and grew it to giant size in order to match Loki. He created a blade of black flames called the Sword of Judgment Nemesis, as he impales Loki from above with it. He blocked Ragnir without being injured. This is a sentient weapon that has been forged for ending worlds, and this weapon had consumed Rototsuka, a squirrel Zoan devil fruit. Rototsuka had waited many years for the return of the warrior god. Loki tries and hits him with everything that he has: lightning breath, Ragnir strikes, Thorheim blasts, but none of it is truly effective. During their fight, Imu declares that domination is the only true bliss in the world, and then his mind drifts to a conversation with Joy Boy from 800 years ago as he screams Joy Boy's name in anger. This momentary lapse in focus, this flash of 800-century-old rage, is what Loki uses to land a clean shot which sends Imu flying into the treasure tree Adam. Loki told him that he did not respect him enough to let him get distracted, and Imu's response was to smile as he recognized the Nidhogg transformation and internally confirmed that the power of the ancient warrior god had finally returned. Meanwhile, Luffy is in the walrus school, eating everything in sight in order to refill his energy because he senses Imu's haki and he understands immediately that he can't fight on an empty stomach. For someone like Luffy, who typically charges in to fight the big bad, this is very strange behavior, and it's not the hallmarkings of someone who is about to deliver a decisive victory over Imu. Loki possessing the Nidhogg fruit is one of the strongest arguments for why he can't defeat Imu at Elbaf. The Nidhogg fruit's mythological purpose is to destroy world trees. In Norse cosmology, Nidhogg gnaws at the roots of Yggdrasil. When Ragnarok comes, Nidhogg rises, and the world tree falls as reality ends. The previous user of this fruit was called the warrior god, and they wielded Ragnir in battle against Nika centuries ago. Loki now carries both the fruit and the weapon, as he is inheriting a mythological rivalry which predates the recorded history of One Piece. Now, the red line is the world serpent. It wraps around the globe, divides the oceans, separates the people of the world. The Harley describes a hellflame serpent that wrapped around the world during the first cataclysm. Dorry and Brogy told us over 1,000 chapters ago that only the great serpent soaked in blood could withstand their combined attack. The red line is red. It wraps around the entire planet. The giants of Elbaf liken it to Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. The Nidhogg fruit is the weapon designed to destroy the red line, and Imu knows this. The moment that he witnessed Loki transform, he was furious. The Nidhogg had been hidden on Elbaf all along, kept away from the world government for centuries. Both Imu and Rox were in search of this fruit in order to aid their goals of global conquest. It's a direct threat to the geography that keeps the world government in power. The size of the Nidhogg transformation scales with the size of the user. A human eating it would become the size of an ancient giant. A regular giant becomes larger still, but only an ancient giant could draw out the fruit's full potential. Loki is already enormous, roughly the same size as the ancient giant Oz, which means that his beast transformation is comparable to a Sea King. This is kilometers worth of dragon. The Nidhogg's primary offense is lightning, and Luffy's rubber body is completely immune to it. The same immunity that countered Enel's Gorogoro no Mi applies here. So the warrior god and the sun god, ancient enemies in the Harley, are now allies, partially because their devil fruits have a natural compatibility which makes them stronger together than apart. Oda hasn't set this dynamic up for a one-arc alliance. The prophesized destruction cannot happen yet. If Loki destroys the red line at Elbaf, the story is functionally over. The seas merge, Fishman Island connects to the surface, the all-blue forms, the world becomes one piece again. The Harley's third world prophecy they will surely meet is resolved. And simply, Oda still cannot fire this off within Act 2 of the narrative. The destruction of the Red Line is the climax of the entire series. It's the dawn that follows Ragnarok. Loki wielding the power to do it is precisely why Oda can't let him succeed here. Nidhogg and its wielder need to survive Elbaf, and they need to carry this power forward into the final war, where it can be deployed when every other piece is in its correct position. Ragnir only accepted Loki after he fought for the right to wield it, and he won. Within Norse mythology, Rototsuka scurries between the eagle at the top of Yggdrasil and the dragon at the roots, carrying messages, stoking conflict, maintaining the cosmic cycle. If Imu wins at Elbaf, the Nidhogg and its wielder survive to fight the battle that actually matters. If Loki wins here, the story's biggest remaining payoff fires before its time. A massive payoff cannot happen when you have so many unresolved threads. Monkey D. Dragon hasn't fought. The most wanted man in the world, the supreme commander of the Revolutionary Army, the father of Luffy, has actually never entered a proper battle that we have witnessed. We know he was a Marine who defected after God Valley, where he tried to save Shanks and Shamrock as infants and was nearly killed by the God Knight Satchel's Maffy. We know he saved Sabo from a Celestial Dragon's cannon, and we know he pulled Luffy out of Smoker's grip at Logtown. We are aware that his Revolutionary Army has been blocking food supplies to Merijo. But when it comes to Dragon's actual abilities, the question of whether if he wields a devil fruit or not, and the major confrontation with the world government that his entire character arc has been building towards, none of this has been revealed or has happened. If the story's final battle were happening right now, Dragon would be there, it's a guarantee. Then there's Blackbeard Marshal D. Teach, who is sitting on Hachinozu with a very important prisoner. This is Garp, hero of the Marines. He is frozen and being held captive on Blackbeard's island after he was pierced through the chest by Kuzan's ice. Teach also has Charlotte Pudding, whose third eye could potentially awaken in order to read poneglyphs. He's got Karibo feeding information. He's also in possession of Law's road poneglyph copies from destroying the Hot Pirates. He scolded Pizarro for letting Kobe and Moria escape, and then pivoted to scheming about the poneglyph race now that the entire world knows about them after Vegapunk's broadcast. Blackbeard's actively preparing for the endgame, and he hasn't clashed with Luffy once in the New World. Their rivalry is important as Teach captured Ace, caused the Summit War, stole Whitebeard's power, and now we learn that he's the son of Roxy Zebek himself. This confrontation can't end at Elbaf because it hasn't even started. Also, where's Shanks? Elbaf is his territory. He stationed himself there guarding whatever secrets the giants hold. His crew tested Bartolomeo's loyalty nearby. Yasop even sank the going Luffy senpai as Shanks smiled when he saw how deeply the Barto Club cared about Luffy. But then we saw nothing. His absence during Imu's assault is glaring. Either he's being saved for a critical moment later in the arc, or his role connects to a separate confrontation entirely, possibly involving his twin brother Shamrock, the vigilant God Knight who wields a Cerebrus sword. Shamrock was born alongside Shanks on God Valley during the native hunting competition. He was raised by the world government after Maffei snatched him from Dragon's arms. Shanks was raised by the Roger Pirates. Because of this, he's dedicated his life to piracy, while Shamrock has dedicated his to the Holy Land. This brother versus brother duel is a thread Oda's built with enormous care, and it hasn't fired off yet. Shanks sitting out the current battle tells you the Elbaf storyline hasn't reached its conclusion. With Garp frozen on Hachinozu, his fate is unresolved. The man who was offered the rank of Admiral and turned it down, who let Luffy hit him at Marineford because he couldn't bear to stop his own grandson, his story cannot just end with him being in a block of ice. Garp's narrative currently connects to Blackbeard, Kuzan, Sword, and the Marines as an institution. None of these threads can be paid off if the climax is happening right now and Imu is defeated at Elbaf. Sabo, the Flame Emperor, has become a living legend whose reputation now exceeds Dragon's. He's witnessed Imu sitting on the empty throne, one of the most closely guarded secrets in the world, as he watched the Gorosei murder Nefertari Cobra in Pangaea Castle, and before dying, Cobra entrusted Sabo with a message that the Nefertari family carries the will of D, and that the contents of Nefertari D. Lily's ancient letter must reach Vivi and Luffy. Sabo carries all of this, which is the confirmation of Imu's existence, the truth of Cobra's assassination, and the Nefertari secret. And none of this information has been delivered to the recipients. The Flame Emperor's thread is still burning, as it importantly connects to Vivi, the will of D, to the Revolutionary Army's endgame, and to the final confrontation with the world government. Again, these threads do not resolve if Imu's beaten at Elbaf. The Void Century is still unrevealed. revealed. Robin has only begun translating the Harley. Sol showed her the document in the Ohara library, and they established that nobody can properly translate it anymore. The knowledge of the language has been lost to time, which is why the giants argue about whether if Nika is the god of liberation, destruction, or laughter. They're all working from incomplete information. The Harley contains 3 chapters depicting 3 worlds. The first world, where mankind touched a forbidden sun and the land was shattered. The second world, where mankind killed the sun and the seas rose. The third world, the present age, which ends with they will surely meet. That prophecy hasn't been fulfilled, as Robin's life work is unfinished. The biggest mystery in the series demands its own center stage, and not a single ancient weapon has been deployed yet. Pluton sits beneath the walls of Wano. Poseidon is Shirahoshi on Fishman Island. Uranus remains completely unknown, and Vegapunk told the world that the Great War never truly ended because these weapons still exist, waiting to rise. You can guarantee you're not going to get a final war until the ancient weapons have appeared. And then the most important dangling threads are One Piece hasn't been found, Laugh Tale's not been reached, Roger arrived there too early, laughed at what he found, and called it a funny story. Vegapunk declared that the fate of the world will be decided by whoever claims One Piece. The story can't climax before the protagonist reaches the final island. And critically, the Straw Hat Grand Fleet hasn't been called. Over 5,600 pirates from 7 crews, each captain carrying a piece of Luffy's Viver card. The narrator at the end of Dressrosa told us that the Grand Fleet would go on to cause an incident of historic proportions. This incident hasn't happened, as those allies have not been assembled, and if this was the final battle, they'd be on Elbaf. There are even a few active threads within Elbaf that haven't resolved, which tells you that the story arc is far from over, and the current battle is more of a midpoint than a climax. Usopp stood face to face with Imu-possessed Gonko and refused to run. He called Imu's actions cowardly, as he got up after being knocked down, equipped his weapon, and dared the ruler of the world to fight the might of Elbaf without hiding behind cheap tricks. Imu forced Usopp to fire at point-blank range and caught him in the blast. Usopp went down, but Elbaf is Usopp's arc after all. This has been his island since Little Garden, since his dream of becoming a brave warrior of the sea was born. So this defining moment, the thing that makes Elbaf truly his, hasn't even happened. If the arc ended with a crushing defeat right now, Usopp's story would be incomplete. There has to be a rally before a fall, or Usopp's entire narrative thread hangs unfinished. Gonko is revealed to be Princess Shuri, and Brook knew her. Shuri murdered her own father. Brook despised her for that betrayal, but during the battle, Gonko's memories broke through Imu's control. The connection to Brook fractured the possession temporarily, and she deactivated her own powers, freeing the captured Straw Hats. Then Imu seized control again and furiously attacked Brook, demanding to know how he knew Gonko. The thread is wide open still, as Gonko resisting Imu's possession from the inside is a subplot that barely begun to develop. And the Covenant system is still actively shaping the battlefield. Imu's Covenants operate on 3 tiers. The Shallows Covenant allows control within the range of Merijo, the Depths Covenant grants immortality but enables control from anywhere, and the Abyssal Covenant is the highest level. Harold received the Depths Covenant and his body moved against his will until Loki killed him at his own request. Harold was begging his son to eat the Nidhogg fruit and to end his suffering. Loki carrying the secret for 6 years while Elbaf despised him, as Gerald finally revealed the truth to rally the giants. All of this has only just come to light within the Elbaf arc. The giants have only just learned that their cursed prince was innocent all along. The emotional payoff of Elbaf's people reclaiming their pride and declaring war on the world government is still in its early stages. Also, Gaban dropped a critical piece of information. Supreme King Haki can counteract the Divine Covenants. When the Roger Pirates fought off Holy Knights who came to reclaim Shanks, they discovered that Conqueror's Haki disrupts Imu's system of control. Luffy, Loki, and Zoro are all Supreme King Haki users. This reveal, I think, is specifically for the final war, and using it to its full effect here at Elbaf would really waste it. There's also a mural carved into the fossilized bark of the treasure tree Adam. Frankie discovered it as there are 8 circles surrounding a larger central circle. These are the 9 worlds of Yggdrasil carved directly into the world tree. This mural was carved during the Void Century, and the leading theory among the giants is that it was made by children fantasizing about different races working together, since the giants know of no historical instances of cultural exchange between races during that era. The mural also appears to visually depict the next text of the Hale itself, the ancient history of the 3 worlds, the 4 gods, the cosmic cycle of destruction and rebirth. It's all encoded into the bark of the tree that Loki's dragon form is mythologically designed to destroy. Elbaf is sitting on more ancient knowledge than anywhere in One Piece outside of Laugh Tale, and Robin's barely scratched the surface of it. If Oda rushes the end of the Elbaf arc, he's throwing away years of world building that he's been setting up since Little Garden. One Piece's final saga has 2 arcs confirmed before the final war, Egghead and Elbaf. Egghead was Act 1. The Gorosei were introduced as physical threats. Vegapunk revealed the truth about rising sea levels and the Void Century to the entire world. Joy Boy's Haki awakened the Iron Giant. The Straw Hats escaped, and just barely, so the stage was set. Elbaf is Act 2, and in Act 2 the villain wins. The Summit War saga follows this structure. Sabaody was Act 1, the crew encounters the power of the world above them and is shattered. Marineford was Act 2, Luffy fights with everything that he has and loses the person he loves the most. The post-time skip New World is Act 3, Luffy returns stronger and conquers what he couldn't before. The final saga is mirroring this. Egghead introduced the scope of the threat. Elbaf is where the threat becomes real, where the heroes are brought to their lowest point. The final war is where Luffy overcomes it. It has been years both in story and in real publication time since the Straw Hats have been genuinely humbled. Since Wano, they've been on a bit of a rocket. 2 emperors have been dethroned, the Nika fruit awakened, Egghead survived, and the crew has accumulated so much momentum that readers have started to assume that they can handle anything. And this assumption is exactly what Oda exploits before his most devastating arcs. He lets you get comfortable as he lets you believe that the heroes have turned a corner, but then he pulls the rug from under you. Imu has been built up for this moment. After 800 years of rule, with Leluzia erased with a single attack, the Covenant system bending Gorosei, Holy Knights, and Kings to his will, and at God Valley when Rocks confronted Imu directly, it took Garp, Roger, Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido all attacking alongside Rocks in order to land any hits. Imu recovered quickly from all of them. This was the combined strength of arguably the 6 most powerful fighters of an entire generation, and they couldn't put Imu down. If Luffy and Loki beat Imu at Elbaf, what does the tension come from then in the final arc? How do you sell the audience on the final war being dangerous when the god of the world has already lost? The story of One Piece would peak in the penultimate arc and drift into a weaker ending. Oda is way too meticulous of a writer to let this happen. But think for a moment, if Imu crushes the heroes here, if the Straw Hats for the first time since Sabaody genuinely cannot protect the people counting on them, then the final war carries the weight of everything that went wrong on Elbaf behind it. Every chapter of the final arc would be driven by the need for the Straw Hats to get back at Imu who had broken them at Elbaf. The Straw Hats of course need to survive a loss, but Oda has already given himself a bit of a way out. We saw Imu collapse and cough blood the instant he arrived at Elbaf. His transformation has a physical cost. There's a ceiling on how long he can sustain what he is doing on Elbaf, and Oda made sure that we noticed it. He could break this resistance, demonstrate power that makes everyone on the island understand that they're dealing with someone beyond an emperor, and then his body forces Imu to return to Merijo before he can finish what he starts. So the Straw Hats don't escape because they've outfought Imu. Instead, Imu has a physical cost for being there in person, thus allowing the Straw Hats to be saved by the bell when Imu needs to return back home. There is a precedent for external intervention at the darkest moment. Dragon arrived at Log Town, Shanks ended the war at Marineford, Joy Boy's Haki on Egghead, and in terms of the Elbaf arc, we actually have candidates for this intervention. Shanks we know is close by and he hasn't appeared yet. Dragon's Revolutionary Army forces are active in the background. Blackbeard is making a move on Merijo while Imu is away, and this could force Imu to return to the Holy Land. If Imu does win at Elbaf, everything slots into place for the final war. Luffy doesn't forget the people who beat him. After Crocodile dropped him twice in Alabasta, his third attempt carried all of that accumulated fury. After Kaido knocked him off of the roof of Onigashima and his heart stopped, Luffy came back with Gear 5, a power born directly from the failure that preceded it. A loss to Imu would burn itself into Luffy's long-term memory, as it would define what Luffy fights for in the coming final war. The Straw Hat Grand Fleet would also finally assemble with over 5,600 pirates answering the call that Dressrosa prophesized. The ancient weapons would enter the stage for the first time since the Void Century. Dragon launches his offensive on Merijo, bringing decades of revolutionary army preparation against the Celestial Dragons at their seat of power. Blackbeard would race for Laugh Tale with pudding and stolen poneglyph copies. Then we have Loki and Nidhogg who need to survive in order to destroy the Red Line. Robin would finish translating the Harley and the full truth of 800 years of suppressed history would finally be revealed. The four gods referenced in the Harley, the Sun God, the Earth God, the Forest God, and the Rain God may finally converge, and Luffy reaches whatever Joy Boy left behind on Laugh Tale. He would laugh and then return to face Imu who beat him earlier at Elbaf. Elbaf is the darkness before the dawn. As the Harley's third world ends with hope, they will surely meet, but the first two worlds ended in separation and catastrophe. This is the pattern of One Piece itself. Destruction, then more destruction, and then finally reunion. The world has already been broken twice. The third world is the chance to undo both catastrophes, to destroy the Red Line, reverse the flood, and restore the world as one piece. Luffy is hopefully going to bring that dawn, but the dawn only means something if the night was dark enough to make you doubt whether if it was coming at all. And right now on Elbaf, the night is still falling. And this is why I think that the villain is going to win in Act 2 of the final war saga. But do let me know all of your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with this theory on why Imu has to beat Luffy and Loki? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next One Piece video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.